Hello everyone, welcome to this week's video from the Purple Penny. My name's Mark. Apologies for being a bit late. We've had some electrical works here today and the internet's been up and down, and obviously I failed to switch the right thing on and off. Everything's been switched on and off and we seem to be working okay now. Apologies for the delay, we're about 7 or 8 minutes late. So this is the second last one of these videos that we'll be doing. It's also the second to last week that the Purple Penny will be trading out of this shop that we have in Mawson Lakes. We've been here since 2019. We've been doing the videos for most of that time. We do them at about this time every Monday, which is 12 o'clock Adelaide time. Usually I go through the news and upcoming mint releases, but not doing that today. I did notice that there were some mint releases announced today, but never mind, good luck with those if you're into that stuff. So I thought today I'll just talk about 5 or 6 things that are memorable for us that we've purchased over the years, whether it be here in the shop or before we traded here in the shop, because before 2019 we did run the business for 10 years or 10 or 11 years before that, primarily just by attending trade shows and that sort of stuff. Before I get on to that though, I will just address a question that someone had last week about a numismatic training course. Now, I think that's a great idea. I think that if there was a numismatic certification available, that would be a useful and popular thing. And who's going to do that? I have no idea. It would be a lot of work generating the content, and there would be a lot of toing and froing between numismatic identities about what was accepted terminology and things like that, because there is no coin collector university or coin dealer university. A lot of the terms and nomenclature and things like that are just generally accepted rather than there being any sort of governing body. So while I think a coin collecting course or a numismatic course would be a great idea, I think generating the content and delivering it would be a challenge. So thank you for the person who came up with that question a couple of weeks ago. Now, before we get started, let's say a few hellos. Hello Paul, hello Adam, hello Tom, hello Jason, hello John, Ian, Gwen, another Jason and Ray. Thank you everyone for joining in today. Now, let's get on to what we're going to talk about today. Right, so I thought what I would do is just talk about some memorable purchases that have happened here in the shop and prior to opening up here. I have talked about a lot of these before, but some of them I've never mentioned before, so this is the first time we've talked about them online. So the first one up here is the milk tin hoard, and this happened in 2024. We had a young gentleman come in. When I say young, I don't know, 30 I guess. He worked for a demolition company, and we get lots of people coming in from demolition companies, people who demolish vacant houses. They collect up their bits and pieces and bring them in here for valuations and assessments and to sell them. Anyway, this young man, he had gotten to a property late, and apparently the other people had found a few coins and things like that, but he found a sealed kitchen cupboard, and inside the kitchen cupboard was 10 or 12 of these Vi-Lactogen milk powder tins. These date from sometime in the 1930s. They were all soldered shut. So he collected them up, took them home, never really thought that too much about them, assumed that there wasn't anything valuable in them. In 2024 he decided to leave a couple open and bring them in here just to see if they were worth something, and several hours later, after opening up 10 or 12 tins, we found 219 10-shilling notes in one of the tins, all bundled up in there, including 5-star notes. All the notes dated from 1939 to 1952. And then in the other 10 or 11 tins, there were about 70 kilos of silver coins. They were all pretty much florins and shillings, all pre-1946, and they'd been sitting presumably in this house from the early 1950s to date and gone undiscovered somehow. Remarkable find, and in terms of purchases that we've made here in the shop, easily the most memorable one that sticks in my mind. We were, I think, Catherine and I and the gentleman who brought them in were all rendered speechless when we realised what it was that he had. I have written a big article on this particular hoard with a focus on the notes. So if you do go and Google the milk tin hoard, there is an article up on the Australian Coin Collecting blog, and also it was published in Independent Coin News, where we break down all of the notes, list off all the serial numbers, and just have a bit of a discussion on what the purchasing power of those notes would have been in the early 1950s. And we look at the star notes as well, because there was 5 star notes, including 2 1939 Sheehan McFarlane notes, which are the scarcest star notes there are. So the milk tin hoard, if you come here into the shop in the next couple of weeks, you actually see there's a couple of those tins sitting on our shelf on the left hand side as you walk in, just as a reminder of that particular hoard. All that stuff is long gone, but we do still have a couple of the tins just to remind us of that particular hoard. A few more hellos before we continue on. Hello, Lisa. Thanks for coming in for a visit this week, Lisa. Michelle, Chris, Michael and Alan. Thank you everyone for joining in today. Next purchase on the list. Well, 1923 halfpenny. This particular coin, we sent it to PCGS and had it graded. It was bought over the counter. I remember the gentleman who brought this coin in. He had some other stuff, and there was a couple of memorable things in the other things that he brought in. Nothing valuable like this coin. This was a 1923 halfpenny. It was wrapped up in a piece of tissue paper, and there was a small scrap of paper written on it in fountain pen that just said valuable ? So the 1923 halfpenny is the key date in the halfpenny series. We've probably sold, maybe 100 or 200 in all the time that we've been trading. We've usually always got one up on our website. They're always popular. Key date coins are always popular. This one though, it really stood out because while we have had a couple of, I guess, low end, I wouldn't say extremely fine, but probably good, very fine 1923 halfpennies. Most of them are fine, so they're well worn. And this one had full centre diamond and 8 pearls, and on the reverse in the date it had a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of mint red. Who knows when this particular coin was put away, but it had been wrapped up in tissue paper in a box for many years. The gentleman who brought it in had inherited the coins in the 1990s and had just sat on them ever since and never looked at them. We sent it off to PCGS and it came back graded AU 58 brown. So, the highest graded PCGS graded coin we'd had before that, I think, was AU 50. So quite considerably better than that, just the barest hint of wear on it. Very unexpected to see a coin like that just pop out of a box of stuff. That sort of thing, if it's going to come in, it will come in a well organised collection. Interestingly, in the same box was 2 little pieces of stone with an old envelope written on in fountain pen, and it said on the envelope, pieces of stone taken from the Great Pyramid of Giza, March 1911. So to me, they were in a lot of ways much more interesting than this, because that's just mind blowing that somehow those 2 little pieces of limestone have made it down the years, and I'm going to keep those pieces of rock and the envelope that they came in, because to me they're not priceless, but they're just such sweet collectibles. I hang on to them. The 1923 halfpenny you see there is it's gone as well, but it was nice to own it for a little while and as a coin dealer, it was quite amazing to just see it flip out onto the bench in front of me one day. Next up, of course, is the 1930 pennies. We've seen 3 genuine 1930 pennies in the shop here in 7 years, and we were lucky enough to buy 2 of them. I never thought we'd see one. We've seen dozens and dozens of fakes. I still remember the day the real one came in, and I've told this story before. It was in, I think it was just wrapped up in tissue as well. It was just wrapped up in tissue. And the gentleman who brought it in flipped it out onto the table and onto the bench, onto the mat, and I looked at it and I knew straight away that it was a real one. And some of our regulars were standing alongside of us, standing alongside of me, and they told me afterwards that I went bright red, and I can remember I was flushing in the face, and I started stammering and my hands started shaking because I never ever thought we'd see a real one. I'd seen so many fakes that when a real one appeared on the counter, I was absolutely dumbfounded. And I guess for Catherine and I, that was the day that we thought that, well, okay, we're real coin dealers now, even though we've been doing it for 14 or 15 years by that point. Every Australian coin dealer's got to buy a 1930 penny. It's the thing to do. It is Australia's most famous coin. Everyone knows about the 1930 penny. It's been part of folklore, arguably since the 1940s, but certainly since the 1960s when the price of them really took off. And, I would say that 2 or 3 times a day people come and ask us if we've ever found a real 1930 penny. And luckily enough, we have. Both of these were brought in as real ones. They weren't found in scrap or anything like that. And it was a pleasure to be able to buy them and work out a deal with their former owners, and for us to be able to hold them at least for a little while. They both went to PCGS, and I believe they both came back the same grade, which was, I want to say, VF30. So, it was a pleasure to be able to deal with those. This is a 2001 Centenary Federation dollar struck on a Euro 20-cent blank. Probably one of 2 errors that stick in my mind that came in over the counter here. This one was given in change in Darwin. Someone got it from a supermarket in Darwin as change. And that gentleman rang us up out of the blue, said, I got a weird dollar coin in my change. There's no coin dealers in Darwin. If I send you some pictures, can you let me know what it is? So he sent some pictures, and it was obvious that it was a real error. And we told him at the time, it was worth a few $1,000s. He was rendered speechless and said, look, I'm coming down to Adelaide sometime in the next year or so. I'll bring it in and sell it to you. And we promptly forgot about it, and literally 7 or 8 months later, this gentleman showed up and tipped this out onto the counter in a little plastic bag. We're lucky enough to be able to purchase it off of him. We weighed it, 5.7 grams. XRF tested it, 89% copper, 5% aluminium, 5% zinc and 1% tin. And that's the same composition as Nordic gold, which the euro coins that are less than €1 are made from. And so what we've got here is a dollar coin that was struck on a Euro 20-cent blank. How did that happen? Well, the company in Korea that makes coin blanks, at that time, they were making coin blanks for the European Union and Australia, and they were making the euro blanks for Europe, and somehow one of those blanks ended up in the hopper for Australian dollar coin blanks, went through the process here in Australia, was struck, went out into circulation, and somehow ended up in a supermarket in Darwin in someone's change. Now, it's mint state. It came back from PCGS's MS63. So I wonder if it didn't live out a couple of decades in someone's money box, put to one side as something interesting, and Then the money box was taken to a bank and tipped out, put through a coin counter, and somehow it's ended up in a supermarket. You know, part of me would love to know what the background is, how that coin was minted in 2001 and ended up in someone's change in Darwin at a supermarket and it was still mint state. I'd love to know the what happened between 2001 and 2021 or 2022 or whenever it was that we bought it. Just a remarkable story. So that was, to have this just wander in one day was quite remarkable. Catherine and I, we still love our errors. We don't really collect them much, but we still love them, and it was great to be able to find what presumably is the first dollar coin struck on a Euro 20-cent blank. Next up is another iconic coin that came in unannounced last year, actually. We just had a gentleman come in one day and he had this coin that he'd bought off of someone in the middle of the 1980s. And he said, I know it's valuable, but I'm looking to move it on. And of course it's a 1981 20-cent struck on a scallop planchet, and I think that's a Hong Kong $5 planchet. So this is the legendary scallop 20-cent piece, perhaps 9 or 10 of them known. It's one of the few errors that's listed in the coin catalogues. They were struck in London. A similar blank contamination happened with this particular coin as with the last one, but at the Royal Mint in London. It is, I would say, as far as errors go, probably the most iconic Australian coin error there is. It's one that everyone knows about, and it's a very valuable coin. And we were just absolutely out of the blue. The gentleman just walked in one day, popped it on the counter and said, do you want to buy this? And for us, sent shivers up my spine, gave me goosebumps. It was just amazing to see one just right there in a little plastic bag on the counter in front of us. You'd never think the day was going to happen. We sent it off to PCGS. It came back MS63, attributed correctly, and the rest is history, so to speak. Again, just a privilege to be able to handle this particular coin. Now, the last one here is not really, it's a story that I've, oh no, we've got one more to go, sorry. There's a couple more to go. In January this year, we got a phone call from a person here in Adelaide, and she said, oh, do you buy sovereigns? It's like, yeah, we buy sovereigns. And she said, oh, I've got one for sale. What are you paying for them? So we have a daily price that we pay for sovereigns, and so we quoted that price to her and said, oh, that's subject to daily change because of the gold price and so on. And if you've got uncirculated coins or key dates, it could end up being more than that. We say the same thing to everyone who's got sovereigns. And she said, yeah, no worries, I'll bring it in next week. So next week she came in and she put this little box on the table, on the bench. There was no one else in there in the shop. And she tipped it out and outpoured all of these Monetarium 5 sovereign cards, which I haven't seen before. There was 20 cards with 5 sovereigns each on them. They were all sort of common date George V and George VI Australian sovereigns, all EF, AU, perhaps some borderline uncirculated. I believe these cards were put together in the 1990s by Monetarium here in Adelaide. Presumably Steve Nugent and Laurie Nugent were doing it. They all had serial numbers on them. And I kind of choked when she tipped them all out in the counter and said to her, I thought you said you only had one. And she said, well, maybe I had more than one. Anyway, there was 100 of them. And again, I never thought that would ever happen. I mean, we've bought 3 sovereigns and 5 sovereigns and 7 or 8 a few times, but never 100 at once. Anyway, it was an interesting exercise. She was a lovely lady, very easy to work with. She shopped them around a little bit. It ended up coming back to us. Managed to work a deal, and the logistics of doing that deal were very much different to the way that we usually work. It was an interesting exercise working with her on that, and we sold them all in 2 days. So they were gone very quickly, and I think, as members of the public, how much money do we make on this? Not very much. It's a surprisingly small amount of money that we make out of these sorts of deals. It's all about just getting the deal done and moving on as quickly as you can. It was a real thrill to be able to just see all those sovereigns in one place at once. But as I said, they were all gone within 2 days. So it was run and done very quickly. It was a real thrill to be able to do it, though. And I thought I'd just finish off with a couple of, I guess, nostalgic looks at things. $2 coloured $2 coins with the paint on the wrong side are kind of, there's something that has followed us for the last 8 years or so. Somehow in sort of early 2019, somehow we became the go-to people for these wrong paint errors with the paint on the wrong side. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but we handled, in the space of just a few months, we handled 4 or 5 of these Bill the Steam Shovel wrong paint errors. They all surfaced at the same time. And the first one that we handled, we wrote an article about it and put an article up on our website and posted it up on Facebook, and it ended up garnering national media coverage. We're on the radio and the newspaper, and sort of on the tail end of it, we ended up with Channel 9 news cameras here in the shop when the shop was still being set up. There wasn't a shop, it was just an empty box. Catherine ended up on the news talking about this sort of stuff. And over the last, over from 2019 through to 2023 or so, we handled many of these wrong paint errors and, turned them over very quickly. Unfortunately, that bad stuff happened with them back a couple of years ago, where someone managed to sort of fake them and get them PCGS graded and lost confidence in the whole market. Was kind of wrecked by that. But it was good just a few weeks ago that we had another one come in here, and it was pleasing to be able to authenticate that, and we ended up purchasing that after a week or two, and sold it literally within 30 seconds of putting it up on our website. So it was, I guess, in some ways it's how the shop started, and if you want to be a bit nostalgic, it's kind of how the shop is finishing. It's one of the last sort of high value areas that we'll ever sell out of the shop here. Now the last story here is one that I don't know if I've shared it on social media before. I've certainly talked about it in the shop, and this harks back to 2013, I guess. The 2013 is before $2 coins were popular. Okay, they were not a popular thing back in 2013, and this was just a few months after the Red Poppy was released through the RSL. It was the first coloured $2 coin. It doesn't use the same painting technology that our circulating $2 coins do. It's a pad printed poppy on the $2 coin, but they were distributed in rolls. Technically they were a circulating coin. They were distributed in rolls to the RSLs, and they were affixed to cards, which I'm sure you all know what they are, and then sold for $10 each as a fundraising thing. Generally the coins with damaged paint weren't stuck to the, and I say stuck because initially they were stuck to the cards. They ended up being put in little baggies and stapled to the cards because they were told by Catherine, the RSL here in Adelaide was told by Catherine not to stick them to the cards, that they should be in bags. So that whole process changed thanks to Catherine. But what the point of the story is that in October, it might have been March 2013, we went to a Militaria show here in South Australia. Catherine went to the Militaria show, and she was talking to the RSL guys there. They had a table there telling them about the bags and things like that. And she rang me and she said, oh, they've got a few of these rolls here, you know, the poppy rolls. Are we interested in buying them? And I'm like, you know, we don't deal a lot in decimal rolls. Decimal rolls are hard work. They take up a lot of space. Anyway, so she bought, I don't know, they had 5 or 6 rolls there. She bought them for, I want to say $160 a roll. That was what the price was, $160 a roll, maybe $150. And she left them their business. They asked for a phone number because they said they had some more, and you know they really didn't want them anymore. So she came home with these 5 or 6 rolls. Didn't really think too much of it, and she got a phone call from the RSL here in the city and said, "Oh, you know, are you interested in the rest of these rolls?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, sure, why not?" So she drove into the RSL in the city, and it turns out that they had 300 rolls. She bought them all for $150 each or something. Really didn't think too much of it. And then over the next 6 months, we put them up on our website and we sold them for, you know, 180, 200, 225, 240. I think they ended up mostly selling for under $250 each. And how many did we keep of the 300 that we handled? 0. We didn't keep one. So at one point there were, the Purple Penny owned 300 RSL poppy rolls. 300. And we didn't keep one. And of course, at their peak, they were selling for $8,000 or $9,000 each. I'll just say that again, $8,000 or $9,000 each. And I kind of look back and think, well, why didn't we keep one? But as I always say to people, you can't keep everything. And if you did keep everything, you'd find out that 99.9% of the stuff didn't go up in value. So while this is a regret, it is nice to think that many of the rolls that are out there have been through our hands, and I know that we have bought some back for several $1,000s each that were bought off of us back in 2013 because the same guy came in a few times to sell them back to us and always took great delight in telling me what he'd paid for them off of us back in 2013. The most desirable decimal roll there is, I would say, well known in the entire coin collecting community and still highly sought after. I think these days they sell for $5,000 or $6,000 each, so the price has come back somewhat. But if you bought them off of us back in the day for $200 or $300 each or $250 each, then good luck to you. So, right, that's it. We got one more video. It'll be next week. I will try and talk Catherine into coming in and sitting in. I guess we'll just be a bit of a goodbye video, and saying thanks to all the people over the journey that have helped us out. Thank you to everyone who's watching today live on Facebook, and thank you to the people on YouTube who watch afterwards. We'll be back 12 o'clock Adelaide time next Monday. We'll see you then. Bye now.